It's Lucy Lich, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Hey, it's Lucy, and welcome to episode number 1 of Tiny House Conversations. Today I wanted to share with you exactly what the show is all about and who it's for. It's in this podcast you'll learn how you can start, design, and build your tiny life. You'll also be walking alongside me as I dive deeper into my own tiny house journey to discover all the details of living tiny. I'll be interviewing experienced tiny homeowners, specialized tiny house builders, adventurers, and influencers in the tiny house world. I'm super passionate about sharing these conversations with you so that you can create your own path of freedom, connection, and nature-based living on your own tiny terms. Now, you might be wondering who I am and why am I starting this podcast? Well, I'm Lucy Lichtenstein, or Lichtenstein, or Lucy Lich for short. And I'm a Sydney-based yoga teacher, I'm a health and wellness geek, and a huge tiny house enthusiast. And several years ago, I hosted a health and wellness podcast called the Reconnected Me podcast on the Wellness Couch, one of Australia's largest podcasting networks. And I interviewed leading health and wellness professionals in Australia and around the world. And when I closed a chapter of that story, I knew I would be coming back to podcasting at a different time, in a different way, although I didn't know what that looked like at the time. But fast forward to today, and here we are. And I've actually started the process of having my own tiny house built, which I'm super excited about, and I'll be sharing more details with you in the coming episodes. You know, for me, tiny living is very much in alignment with my worldview and my lifestyle. It's a path that I know will allow me to create my own back to basics way of living, closer to nature, with less impact and deeper connection to the earth. It's a path that honors simplicity, minimalism, freedom in multiple ways, helping to reduce living expenses, getting out of the rent trap and other city-based societal systems, and so much more. And what I've noticed is there seems to be a shortage of Australian-based tiny house podcasts, you know, with many of them being based in the US. And, you know, in different parts of the world, there are some differences in regulations and building codes, size and weight restrictions, and more. So Tiny House Conversations is a resource for you if you're looking for relevant information and experiences in this part of the world. But even though I'm based in Australia, I'll also be bringing on guests in the tiny house space from around the world. So this podcast is also a source of inspiration with practical insights for curious tiny houses from all walks of life and wherever you are in the world. And with Tiny House Conversations, my intention is also to create opportunities for the tiny community to connect, learn, grow, and evolve together. And now to let you know what else is coming up in future episodes, if you're starting out on your tiny house journey and looking for DIY how-to tips, or you have no idea where to begin planning, designing and building your own tiny home, maybe you're curious about options for off-the-grid facilities or being on the grid in a tiny home, tiny trailers, tiny house laws and regulations, tiny building companies, tiny insurance, ideas for where to park your tiny home, or you simply love hearing stories, experiences, and learning valuable lessons from tiny house dwellers, then you're in the right place. And we'll also be exploring different topics related to living tiny. You know, I feel like this is such a holistic way of living and being. So stay tuned for episodes on things like minimalism, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, and so much more. Now, before I wrap up here today, I want to share something you can take away with you right now. Here's a quick tip that I've learned on my own journey that's been super helpful for me. One of the most common questions I've noticed people have in the tiny house world, it's a question that I have for myself too. And it's, where can I park my tiny house? So if you're on Facebook and you do a search for tiny house groups in your area or country, now inside those groups you'll find many people who own land that are actually advertising for someone with a tiny house to rent space on their land. And usually it's for a financial exchange, but sometimes it's also for time and effort to help maintain and upkeep the land. And then even other times it can be for other odd jobs. And I'm seeing this pop up more and more in the groups that I'm in. And I've also heard of many people having success with this. Another thing you can do is create your own post inside these groups, asking if anyone has or knows of someone with land or space that's willing to rent out for someone with a tiny house. So there you go. And stay tuned for an episode on this exact topic where we'll dive deeper into other ways you can find a place to park your tiny home. Now, if you want to go on this journey with me to start your own tiny house adventure or learn more about different aspects of tiny life, make sure you hit the subscribe button now so you know exactly when a new episode is out. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Hey Tiny Lifers, thanks so much for listening. And before you go, one of the best ways to support this podcast is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more valuable tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this episode and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thanks so much in advance. I appreciate you, and see you in the next session.